The voice you're hearing here now is Paul Verhoeven, the director of Starship Troopers.
And this is Ed Neumeyer, the writer of Starship Troopers.
And we are here in the middle of controversy immediately. It's interesting, I'm quoting here an article of Richard Schickel in Time magazine, who said that maybe it's saying that war inevitably makes fascists of us all. Then, of course, he says that the best guess that the filmmakers didn't think about anything like that at all because they were only concerned about special effects. But I can tell you that the movie is, in fact, in our opinion, stating that war makes fascists of us all.
That's true. That was the theme. And this opening was modeled on the Why We Fight films of World War II. In fact, this whole movie is modeled on propaganda films made during the World War II.
Yeah, they're propaganda films from the American propaganda films. And of course, there is also clearly a disguised statement about propaganda films of the Third Reich. In fact, it is saying, of course, that this fascist propaganda that is kind of apparent in the movie should be really read, at least that's how we meant it, should be read as something that is not good. So whenever you see something that you think is fascist, you should know that the makers coincide with your opinion, thinking that it is not good. That is not a good statement, and this is not good politics. And if you see a black uniform, you should also know bad, bad, bad. You know, it's very simple. You should not read it differently than that. We all agree with that. It's bad. If you see Carl later in a black uniform, and when he makes certain statements, and we'll come back to that later, then you know that it's about bad.
Yeah, when I was growing up, it was always these films, these kind of action-adventure films were always called fascist. I remember a lot of my really liberal friends always used to tell me that RoboCop was a fascist film. So I thought we should just like kind of go out and sort of make a film that was essentially a fascist action-adventure film. And so that's what we've done.
Yeah, but I would see it a bit more nuanced because I feel that we are certainly stating in the movie that we disagree with some of the premises that are said here. But what it says, of course, in this scene is that the war was not started by the bugs. Like, that's a very interesting political situation because in politics in general, especially in American politics, there's a tendency, of course, to take a part of history, but not acknowledge what happened before. If you read stories about Iran, for example, you always hear about, of course, about the hostages that were taken in Tehran, but rarely do you hear about the terrorist regime of the Shah. Isn't it? So history starts for example, at the terrorist taking the embassy, which is a bad situation too. But the other bad situation that was caused by the CIA, of course, putting the Shah in power in Tehran, and then having the Shah do the most awful things, that part of history is always not acknowledged. And that's basically what this is about, that little item we just saw. It's about, in the beginning of the movie, you'd think that basically the bugs attacked, and the bugs are bad, and the bugs have to be destroyed. It says, Clandato has to be destroyed. Isn't it? That's what the first item of the movie says, the first fatnet. But now, later, you find out that there's only part of history. Because the real history started with the Mormon extremists setting up a colony in a territory that they were not asked to come into, which is the Clandato, let's say, the Arachnid territory. And then and basically after they retaliate, and they retaliate by killing the Mormons, but also by sending a meteor to Buenos Aires, as we see later in the movie, then we get really pissed off and forget about all that and say, oh, look at that meteor, how bad, we have to attack. And that's, I think, is the politics of the movie, isn't it? It confirms what the Washington Post wrote about me when the film came out, the notoriously perverted director Paul Verhoeven.
And I think, Paul, you could say that you're kind of proud of that review, aren't you?
I thought it was a pretty disgusting review here, to be honest, because it accused us of neo-Nazism.
Yeah, well, they didn't. That was kind of interesting to me.
It seemed to miss the point that basically the movie was about fascism in our own society.
I was disappointed by that one in particular because I'd grown up thinking the Washington Post was the coolest, smartest newspaper, except for maybe the New York Times. And indeed, they missed the point entirely and seem to want to jump only on the PC bandwagon. I think that...
You know that the whole press, according to Chomsky anyhow, is really rallying behind the government, whatever it says, to the left or to the right, for the Democrats or Republicans.
Yeah, I would love to
they
know...
They call it freedom of press, but of course there is a censored freedom of press. Everybody censors himself.
Yeah, this movie was made with Chomsky's ideas about media in mind. But I think that back to the... oops, here's a hopper. We haven't seen hoppers yet. But while we're waiting for the hopper to kill this guy, we'll talk about the Post. Now, the Washington Post, I think, has a notion, or at least the fellow who wrote that article, that there is only certain prescribed ways that you can talk about themes like fascism, or only certain ways you can present these things. And if you walk outside those lines, then you are in trouble. Then, in fact, you are sort of, as they charged us, supporting fascism, which is not the case at all.